ordinary people, extraordinary God. Ordinary people, but an extraordinary God. You know, it's been said over and over again that the cemetery is full of potential. It's been said that the cemetery, that the graveyard is the richest place on earth. As a matter of fact, Miles Monroe says it like this. He says, there lie buried companies that were never started. Speaking of a cemetery. He said, inventions that were never made, best-selling books that were never written, and masterpieces that were never painted. He said, in the cemetery is buried the greatest treasure of untapped potential. And you know, when I read that, there were two things that immediately jumped out to me as reasons why that the graveyard is so rich with potential. The first thing was fear, right? Fear keeps us paralyzed. It keeps us from doing the things that God has called us to do, the things that we know we should do, but for some reason, fear paralyzes us and holds us right where we are. But see, here we don't have to spend a lot of time with this because we just came out of our series, Overcoming Fear, right? Courage over fear. So we spent a few weeks of going through that as we walk through the book of Joshua. So we understand how to overcome fear. But then there's another reason that immediately jumped out to me is that we have not tapped into the right power source. That we have not really plugged into the real source, of course, which is God. So that means we have untapped potential lying on the inside of us. You know, for some of us, we may think, yeah, I'm tapped in because I'm saved. I'm a child of God. I'm tapped in. But it's just not that simple. I wish it was. I wish that once we said yes to Jesus Christ, that everything immediately changed like this, and we're all plugged in, we're tapped in, and we're living free, and we don't have to battle anything anymore. I wish it was that simple, but it's not. Let me try to use this example and see if I can bring a little light to it. Y'all know surge protectors, right? And some of the surge protectors, they have a little button on there that you have to actually turn on and turn off. Y'all have seen those before? You know, I've plugged in to the surge protector and plugged it into the wall and thought I was good. I had zero power. Matter of fact, we've done it in here, plugging things up where literally that power button on that surge protector is off. Right? We are plugged in, but we don't have the power running through us. You see, we can be plugged in, but we have not activated the power of the Holy Spirit on the inside of us. You see, so how do we tap into that power? How do we begin to experience the extraordinary God running through our lives? You see, and over the next few weeks, that's where we're going to dig in. We're going to see how God used ordinary people to do extraordinary things in their lives. And this morning, we're going to start with a message that I am calling Unleash Your Potential. Unleash your potential. You know, as people, we often gravitate to people that are kind of like us, right? People that have something in common with us. If we can just take a look at our friends, our friend circle, we would see that, you know, everybody that's a part of our friend group kind of has something in common. Whether it's our personalities or whether it's our sense of humor or our interests, our hobbies, or maybe it's God that we have in common or something else. It's easier for us to identify with that person. It's easier for us to become with them when they are like us. And when I say like us, I say like ordinary people. People that make mistakes. People that have flaws. People that have faults. people that struggle to do things and struggle with things at times. You see, we all have these kind of things in common. Now, if you're a perfect person, I'm not talking about you, right? If you're one that you don't have any flaws, you always do everything right, you always have the right answer, you don't struggle with anything, I'm not talking about you. But I'm talking to people that are kind of like me, that have some of these things going on in our lives. I'm talking to ordinary people. You see, something else that we might have in common as ordinary people is our desire to make an impact with our lives. You know, I don't believe anybody doesn't want to make an impact with their life. I don't think anybody just wants to be a deadbeat and do nothing. You see, we all want to make an impact, whether that impact is in our families or in our communities, or we want to make an impact on teenagers' lives or married lives, or we want to make an impact in the field of science or in the field of medicine or business or in the arts. Whatever it is, we want to make an impact. You see, we all want to be part of something that is bigger than us. We all want to be a part of something that actually changes lives. So much so that we often become part of organizations or nonprofits. We say, you know what, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to get in there and I'm going to put my hands to work and my feet to work. But what often happens is after we join the organization, we kind of find ourselves being spectators. We had good intentions going in, but instead of us really getting involved, we become spectators. You know, I don't know when it happens or I don't know how it happens. I don't know that part. And I can just come up with some things and maybes, right? So maybe it was that, you know, we begin to think that, you know what, I'm just one person. What difference can one person make? What difference will my effort make? You know, there's nothing special about me. I don't have any special gifts or any special talents. You know, this organization is big. Nobody's gonna see me in here. Or we say this, maybe I'm just an ordinary person with limited potential and no influence. You know, sometimes being ordinary means that we get lost in the crowd. Sometimes being ordinary means we get pushed to the fringes, to the edge of the crowd, that we get overlooked and that we get underestimated, where we begin to feel invisible and like our voice doesn't matter. But here's the thing that I want us to remember, is ordinary people are exactly who God desires to use to make an impact in this world. It's ordinary people. And in case you think I'm just making this up, let me read a scripture for you right here in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 26. It says this. It says, brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were noble of birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him. Well, I don't know if you consider yourselves any of those, but when I read it, I see ordinary people there. I see ordinary people. He said, look, I'm not going after all those highfalutin people and everything else like that. No, I am calling the ordinary. God called and God chose ordinary people to do extraordinary things. He called and he chose ordinary people, people like you and people like me, to do extraordinary things through us. So this means he doesn't pick us, the ordinary people, because we're the only ones left on the side, on the bench. It's like, okay, well, you know what? Lonnie's the only thing I got left. Okay, Lonnie, come on in now. Come on, your turn. Get on in there. I don't know if y'all have ever experienced that before, but being picked last on the team is like, daggone it, man. Or not even being picked at all. No, we just going to run 4 today, man. We ain't going to run 5. We're going to run 4. And then they got you sitting on the side. What? Right? I don't know if you've experienced that, but I've experienced that a time or two, right? I've been the last one called. Okay, come on, you're on the team. God does not do that with us. God picks us first. He picks us first. We're not overlooked or anything else. He say, you know what? No, I want him. No, I want her. I want her on my team. I got something special for her. I got a play designed just for her. I want her on my team. You see, God doesn't run from us, but he runs to us. He comes to get us. He called you. He said, hey, look, I want you. And he comes to get us. Right? So this should be good news for all of us. It means that we don't have to follow some strict criteria. Oh, we got to have this GPA. We got to have been born on this side of the tracks. We got to have this amount of money before he uses us. None of that matters to God. There's no criteria that we have to make. Oh, let me change that. There is one criteria that we have to fulfill to be used by God. And that means be alive. And I'm not talking about being alive in Christ. Like, I'm not trying to be spiritual or anything else. No, look, all we have to do is be alive. Be breathing. If we are still breathing, then God can still use you. If you got breath in your lungs, God can use you. That's the only criteria that needs to be met. You see, throughout the Bible, we see over and over and over again of God using ordinary people and doing extraordinary things through their lives. If we can just look at just the 12 disciples, Jesus chose 12 untrained, flawed, normal, regular, ordinary dudes to change the world by spreading the gospel and starting the church. And look, I don't mean starting a church. I mean starting the church, universal, big C. And by my standards, they did all right. They did pretty good, right? I mean, all of them hit it out the park except for the one. Y'all know the one, right? Judas. All of them did their job. But you know what? He did his job too, right? That was his job, so I guess he kind of hit it out the park too. We'll give him an inside the park instead of the over the fence one, right? But he did his job. He did his job. All of them did it. All they were was 12 ordinary men being used as instruments by God. And they were able to accomplish all that they did. Here's the question. What can God do through you? That need to sit there for a minute. Because I need y'all to think about that. What can God do through you? Let me say it another way. What does God want to do through you? That changes it a little bit, right? It's not hypothetical, or what can he do? Oh, he can do this. No. What does he want to do through you? When I talked about he had a specific play for you, no, he got a specific play for you. Scripture says, Jeremiah 29:11, I know the thoughts and the plans that I have towards you. He knew us from the womb before we were even in the womb. You see that question right there? I want to know the answer, not only for me. I want to know what can he do, what does he want to do in my life and through my life. But I want to know what he wants to do for your life. I want to be able to see what he does with your life. And then collectively, what can he do with us together. What does God want to do with Freedom Church, through Freedom Church? What is it? What does God want to do? You see, as a church, our vision is to make an impact and change lives through the love of Jesus Christ. We know that there's something that he wants to do. We know that it is something great that he wants to do through Freedom Church. He wants to change lives. He wants to make an impact, and he wants to do it through his love, not by what we can do. You see, what we can do is we can build buildings, and we can amass great fortunes, and we can start businesses, but it's only what we do for God that will last. It's only what we do through Christ that means anything. It's only through him. So if the angels in heaven aren't rejoicing when we do something, if the devil isn't mad when we're doing something, if God isn't smiling when we're doing something with our lives, then what are we really doing? What are we really doing? The heavens should be rejoicing. The enemy should be mad. He should be somewhere kicking rocks. Look at them. There they go again. I'm going to have to do something about them. They should be mad at what we are doing with our lives. So this morning, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about two ordinary women who are very much overlooked. And honestly, I don't remember reading about them. I didn't remember nothing about them. And then I was reading a couple weeks ago, and I was like, oh, wow. Matter of fact, I think I even told my wife about it, these two women. But I had no recollection about them. And I want to dig into them. But first, I have to share something, because God asked me this question. He said, how are they reading the Bible? He said, how are they reading the Bible? Are they reading it as spectators, or are they reading the Bible as participants? And I was like, wow, okay, Lord. And he said, as spectators, it's like we're driving down the highway and we're seeing billboards going. We're just driving, and we're billboards. There's a bunch of billboards that are up, and some we pay attention to. Oh, yeah, look, okay, yeah, I'm hungry. I'm going to have to pull off over here so I can go here. Or I need some gas, so I need to make sure I see that. Okay, 2 more miles? Okay, then I'm going to get there. But then there are so many billboards that we just run past. Don't even recognize. They just going. We just going. But if we're reading it as participants, you see, it's like we're reading the doctor's report of our own visit, meaning that everything that we read on it applies to us. It means that there is nothing that I'm going to read in my doctor's report that is not applicable to my life. So when you're reading the Bible, are you reading it like a spectator, like you're driving down 95 and just billboards just going right by you? Or are you reading the Bible as if you're a participant, as if every single word in here applies to you? Because it does. It's important to you. So how are you reading it? Here's an example, right? Think of Exodus, because we're gonna go in there in a minute. Think of Exodus. Exodus means exit, right? Getting out. So if I'm reading it as a participant, here's what I'm reading. Okay, Exodus, yes, about the children of Israel, how they were in bondage, and God brought them out of bondage and took them into the promised land. That's true. 100% true. But that's as a spectator. Now, if I read it as a participant, here's what I read. Exodus. Wow. This is a journey out of the bondage of sin. This is the journey out of the bondage of depression. This is a journey out of the bondage of whatever it is that you are going through. And then as they walk through there, we see that God brought them into the land that he promised to them, a land of freedom, a land of deliverance, a land of God's promises always being fulfilled. How are you reading the Bible? Does that make sense? Do you get it? You got to put yourself in the Bible. It applies to me. Now let's get back to the two ordinary women here. So let's begin. So we're going to be looking in Exodus chapter 1. And let me kind of bring us up to speed here. At the end of Genesis, we see that Joseph had died and everything else. And as we begin Exodus, it's about 350 years since they died. And now we're on the scene, and the Israelites are underneath they're being controlled by a new Pharaoh. So we jump in Exodus chapter 1 and verse 6. And it says, "Now Joseph and all his brothers and all that generation had died. But the Israelites were exceedingly fruitful. They multiplied greatly, increased in numbers, and became so numerous that the land was filled with them." Here's how we have to read ourselves into it. We can't let verses like this slip by us right here. Because in verse 7 it says, "The Israelites were exceedingly fruitful. They multiplied greatly." So when I read that, I began to think of the promises that God had made to Abraham. And I'm like, oh, wow, that you're still keeping that promise. You told Abraham that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars. You told him to count the stars. You told him that the sand on the seashore, he'd have descendants just like that. You see, what we can't do is we can't let our memories fail us. Because our memories of God's promises, those are the things that fuel our faith. You see, so when I read stuff like this, okay, God, I saw that you promised it here, and now you're bringing it to pass here. You see, in Exodus verse 8, it says, "Then a new king, whom Joseph meant nothing, came to power in Egypt." Meaning, if he would have known who Joseph was, if he would have understood who Joseph's God was, he wouldn't be doing what he's about to do. There's no way that he could say, look, I know what Pharaoh, that other Pharaoh boy, he got his butt kicked. They sent all kind of plagues and everything else like that. They killed his kids and then they drowned them in there. I don't want to have nothing to do with them. But they said it was 350 years that had passed, so that meant nothing to him. Here's the takeaway for us. We're going to run into people that are in high places that don't care about our God, that care absolutely nothing about him. They're going to try to oppose us at every level, anytime they get. They're going to be trying to do something to hold us down, keep us down, do something bad to us every time. But we must always remember God and his promises to us. Right? I can't be worried about it. No, I can't be worried about anybody else over there. But I can remember God's promises to me. That he is going to take us into the land of Canaan. That he's able to deliver us. I can remember all those things because they apply to me. In verse 9, he says, "Look," he said to his people, "the Israelites have become far too numerous for us." Meaning God's plan is still working. God's plan is still working. But here's what this Pharaoh says. He says, "Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous. And if war breaks out, we'll join our enemies, fight against us, and leave this country." Verse 11, "So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor. And they built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites and worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with harsh labor and brick and mortar and with all kinds of work in the fields. In all their harsh labor, the Egyptians worked them ruthlessly." Pharaoh's trying any and everything he could to kill God's plan, but it failed. Right? Every time. Here's something for us to remember. Nothing can stop a move of God. Absolutely nothing. Did you hear all the stuff that they were doing to them? They said, let's try this. Okay, let's put this on them. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, let's put this on them. Oh, that didn't work either. Well, let's put this on them. But guess what? They continued God's plan continued to move straight ahead. They couldn't stop it. There was no force from hell. There was no modern day Pharaoh. There's no chaos. There's nothing a bad week, a bad month, or a bad year can't do. People may kick us while we are down. They may pour salt and everything else in our wounds. They may lie to us or lie on us, but they can call us anything but a child of God. But guess what? God's plan, it won't fail. Guess what we got to do? We got to do like Taylor Swift and just shake it off. We got to, whatever they keep trying to throw at us, we got to just shake it off. We can't let that stay on us. We just shake it off. So whenever anybody comes, oh Lord, if anybody comes and asks you, are you a Swiftie? That's what they call Taylor Swift fans, in case y'all didn't know. If they say, y'all, you a Swiftie? Yes, I am. I love that song, Shake It Off. I love that song, Shake It Off. Whatever you try to throw at me, devil, I'm just going to shake it off. I'm just going to do just like this right here. I wish I knew how the song goes because I was singing for you, but I don't know. Shake it off, shake it off. I don't know, something like that. Right? We got to shake it off because there is no weapon that formed against us that shall prosper. No weapon. You see, we have to remember the promises of God. This is a promise that no weapon formed against us shall prosper. Verse 15, it says, the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, whose names were Shiphrah and Puah, when you are helping the Hebrew women during childbirth on the delivery stool, if you see that the baby is a boy, kill him. But if it is a girl, let her live. Here are the two women, Shiphrah and Puah. You know, so Pharaoh told them to commit genocide. Y'all know who Pharaoh is, right? Pharaoh is the king, right? He's the supreme ruler. And they even looked at him as an intermediary between God and the people. So he was like a influencer. He influenced all the behavior and all the decisions that they would make. And if they didn't take his orders, if they didn't keep his orders, they're assured of a few things that could happen to them. For one, there's going to be some imprisonment, torture, ridicule, shame, demotion. They get exiled, and something else that is a very real possibility, that might be number one on the list, is that they would actually die because they didn't follow what Pharaoh said. So what does Pharaoh represent to us today? He represents an influential leader. He represents the in crowd that we're always trying to be a part of. He represents peer pressure. He represents pop culture. He represents society. He represents people with power. Pharaoh is an influencer. You see, we're familiar with that term, right? We follow influencers on social media. I know I follow a few of them, right? We look at them. We've seen the popular dance, and we want to do the dance like that. We've seen the different challenges and everything else like that, the different trends or fads that they're on, the products that they're endorsing, right? We've either done it or been a part of it or bought whatever they're selling. We've done all that. We do it because it's fun, it's cute, and everything else like that. It's popular. But here's what I don't want you to, I don't want you to hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that following an influencer is wrong or it's bad or anything like that. I'm not saying that. Matter of fact, I got a nephew who literally, that is his job. That's all he does. He has hundreds of thousands of viewers. And I mean, when I tell you this, he bought a house. He bought a car. He had his house built. He bought a car and everything else. That is his livelihood. Social media, influencer. So I'm not saying that anything is wrong with being an influencer. But we have to make sure that we understand that when we're listening to certain people, the pharaohs, we don't want to be outside of pop culture. We don't want to be outside of different things of society. We always want to be on the inside. but we have to understand, what is it that we are following? What is it that we are doing? You see, what is Pharaoh asking us to do today? He's not saying commit genocide. He's not saying that. But what he is asking us, he's saying, I want you to choose wrong over right. I want you to turn against what you know to be right. I want you to choose what might feel good over what is good. I want you to go along with the masses, what everybody else is doing. I want you to turn a blind eye. I want you to choose pop culture over kingdom culture. I want you to choose your way over God's way. I want you to choose your truth over God's truth. Pharaoh wants to influence. He wants us to follow his influence. He's kind of like this right here. Y'all know who that is? The Pied Piper, right? Y'all remember that from kids, you read the stories, right? That's Pharaoh. That's influence. He said, just follow me. And here's what Pharaoh is saying. He's saying, you don't have to go all the way. You just have to go some of the way. Right? They say, look, if it's a girl, let her live. But if it's a boy, no, I need you to kill him. If you want to go this far, then you're okay. Think about that. Think about that. Oh, you're okay with doing this. Now, you'll be all right. Think about what Pharaoh is doing. Verse 17, it says, the midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them. They let the boys live. Now, why would they do something like this? Why would they risk punishment or even death? Because they feared God more than they feared Pharaoh. They feared God more than Pharaoh. That reverential fear that they had. I'm not talking about, oh, I'm scared of God. No, I'm talking about the respect that they had for God. What that did is that created inside of them a commitment to God. And when we make a commitment and keep our commitment to God, he will sustain us. He will sustain us. So here's some questions that we have to ask ourselves. Who do we fear the most? God or Pharaoh? Who are we committed to? God or Pharaoh? Who do we want to please? God or Pharaoh? In verse 18, it says this, then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live? The midwives answered, Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and they give birth before the midwives arrive. So God was kind. Listen to this. So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. You see, I'm pretty sure that this wasn't an easy decision for Shiphrah and Puah, but they trusted in whom they believed. You see, the essence of Christianity isn't certainty. That's not the essence of Christianity. The essence of Christianity is trust. I trust God. I trust him with everything that I have. Am I certain that it's going to happen? No, I'm not certain that it's going to happen, but I do trust God. That if it doesn't happen, that there's a very good reason that it didn't happen, that it is the very best thing that could have happened to me. I trust God. So what we do is we see here something that wasn't written, but it was their choice to turn from going their own way to going God's way while they put their life at risk. And when I thought about that, this scripture came to my mind in Galatians 2:20, and it says, my old self has been crucified with Christ. So it is no longer I that live, but Christ lives in me. So I live in this earthly body by trusting in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. You see, it's not given into our natural inclinations. It's not given into our fleshly desires. These are things that we have to not give into daily. You see, we lose our lives and we walk forward in his life, our new life with Christ. And let me read verse 20 again, because this is what it looks like. It says, so God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. You see, God honored his commitment to them. And it was at the point of the midwives' obedience. That's when God began to take over. That's when his mighty work began to happen through them. He said, y'all trust me? Y'all gonna obey me? Then guess what? I'm gonna work through you. And that's when the ordinary becomes the extraordinary. Now let me give you a picture of what this actually looks like. Show this picture right here. It's kind of hard to see, and I apologize for that. I couldn't find a better picture. But if you see the guy in the middle standing down the podium, that's President Ronald Reagan. So you know it's back in the 80s, right? So here we are in 1984, and the lady to his right is a lady by the name of Linda Down. And she ran the New York City Marathon in 1984. And I'm gonna read some things that I put from this. Okay, so there were 1,400 runners. They started the race, but of course, with any kind of marathon, there are going to be far more people that drop out and don't finish the race than actually finish the race. Now, normally when you run a marathon, the fastest time to finish is between 2 to 3 hours, right? I don't understand how they do it. I don't even know why they do it. That just don't make sense. 26 miles you need to go, get in your car and just drive down the street, 26 miles. Right? Ain't no reason to run. You can just get in the car and just drive, right? So that's me. But here we got Linda Down, who comes in. She was the last person to finish the race. It took her 11 hours to run it. And I don't know if you can see, but she has crutches because she has cerebral palsy. And she ran the race with cerebral palsy. So a reporter asked her, why even try? And Linda replied, we are living in negative times. Things feel impossible today. I thought that if I could try to do it, it might be an inspiration to others. And maybe they would try some big things too. This was 1984, but it still applies today, right? We're living in some negative times, and things feel impossible at times, right? This is applicable to us today. So here's what she said. Then she added, but the last 11 miles were an act of God. And he said, what do you mean an act of God? With 11 miles to go, I ran out of my strength. I didn't have it anymore. And I finished the race on borrowed power. I finished the race on borrowed power. You see, all of us who trust in God, that take that ultimate step in trust and move that over to commitment, we too can depend on borrowed power. The power of God himself to be able to go from the ordinary to the extraordinary, where even the gates of hell or all those forces that we're talking about cannot prevail against borrowed power. The enemy gonna beat my butt every single time I try to do it by myself. Every single time that we try to do it by ourselves, the enemy will kick our butt. But when we're on borrowed power, where we're in extraordinary territory, that's when no gates of hell can prevail against it. So let me close with this. You know, we have our ultimate example of Jesus. He came as an ordinary man. He didn't come with all the pomp and circumstance and all that other stuff. He didn't come with all that. He came as an ordinary man. He had ordinary parents who lived ordinary lives. What he was trying to tell us is that I'm just like you. I'm no different than you. He worked a blue-collar job, and just like many of us, he was misunderstood and misappreciated and underestimated. Matter of fact, they even asked him in the Bible where they were talking about him, they said, can anything good come from Nazareth? I mean, is anything good? Y'all talking about this dude is the Messiah. Can't nothing good come out of that place. But he spent his time with ordinary people, with people that were marginalized, with people that were unknown, with people that were lost amongst the crowd. But he showed us what was possible when ordinary people allow an extraordinary God to use them. Because what did he always say? I do nothing on my own, but only what the Father tells him. I'm not out here running rogue. I'm not out here trying to do it all by myself. I'm not out here saying, look at me. But I'm doing any and everything that my Father tells me. That question that I asked you before, what can God do through you? What can God do through you? Isn't it something that the God of the universe, the creator of the universe, that he would call us, that he would choose us to be a part of the greatest story ever told, the redemption of humanity. And he says this, he said, you know what, I want you to be a part of that story. I want you to play a part in that story. I wrote a script just for you, and I want you to be a part. I don't know if you're like me, but I've watched movies and TV shows, and there are plenty that I say, you know what, I can do a better job than that. I know I can. This is terrible. But this that we've been called to, the part that he has for us to play, it's not playing anybody different. It's not playing a villain. It's not playing the hero. It's not playing even the extra in the movie. He said, I don't want you, the only part I want you to play is I want you to play yourself. You ain't got to be nobody else. I want you to be you. And he's inviting us to be a part of that story. The question is, will we say yes?